or the economy is suffering. Nigeria is one of the stable democracies in Africa. You can count Nigeria amongst the likes of Ghana and South Africa. I mean, this was not so some years ago. The country was a pariah nation. Even the likes of Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal had their own issues. So there's something to celebrate. The country has been through civil wars, it's been through military dictatorships, it's been through coups and counter coups that brought the nation down. The amount of religious and ethnic polarity is such that in some nations they won't survive. I keep saying it, but somehow Nigerians survive that polarity. People are able to insult themselves and say, you're a Hausa man, I hate you. You're an Igbo man, I dislike you. But the country is still together, and I find that amazing. If it happened in some countries, I mean, go to see it out today. It's Christians and Muslims. It's happened before, but the country didn't burn.
And we have Rwanda as well, where ethnic groups have turned against one another and committed one of the greatest genocide in the world's history.
It's pretty tough to live in this country. I mean, with all the talent, with all the potential, the resources, when Nigerians make it through and they do it well.
Marianne, I mean, 55 years down the line, what have been the highlights for you? What are those things you look at and you say, I'm proud to be a Nigerian. It's indeed an honor to be born and be living in this country?
Not too many, I must say. Well, I mean, with due respect to every Nigerian, I love the fact that I'm Nigerian. I would not want to live anywhere else in the world. I always tell people I don't understand why people would die in the Mediterranean running to another country or even wasting their time at these visa offices. I love Nigeria. It's a free country, freer than than America. But are there many highlights for me? Not so many, just a few. The fact that, just like you said, we're still together in the midst of all the troubles, in the midst of all the diversity, we're still united. Something still keeps us together. And the fact that I'm Nigerian, I'm proud to say that the number one thing for Nigerians is that we are hopeful. We're always hopeful. Even when it looks like it's bleak, I mean, we shouldn't be hoping about hope. We're still very hopeful and we're good managers. If our monies are being taken by some politicians every day, that we hear billions and billions, but the average Nigerian still holds on, still is able to manage his life through. There's no lights, you have to have your own water. But we're still moving on strong. I mean, I was listening to LBC and the Londoners are complaining. Oh, why do they have to take our money and do this? Oh, we don't have houses. But the average Nigerian hardly complains. I mean, even when we complain, we go back to bed. We could manage, So I think that's the only thing I'm proud of. But really, politics, I don't think we've started yet. Economy-wise, we're still getting there. Education, zero. I'm so sorry. Education, zero. And infrastructure, I don't think we're anywhere there. I mean, I was looking at Indonesia, Malaysia, and I'm looking at all the things that are happening there. And I'm wondering, do they have two heads than us? I mean, we can do this. We have all the money. We pride ourselves as, Africa's biggest economy, but we're not doing anything. Look at Ghana. I feel sad every time, I look at Ghana and what's happening there. And then how many years less, independence-wise, how many years are you guys?
I think Ghana was the first.
2 or 3 years?
3 years.
And see where they are. And we cannot boast of anything.
Where are they? Okay. Daniel, 55 years down the line, are we progressing or regressing?
We are not progressing, as it were, because let's face reality. A 55-year-old man should look down the line and say, after 55 years, this is what I am. But it appears that...
But as far as nationhood is concerned,
yes,
a 55-year-old man is an infant. As far as nationhood is concerned.
No doubt. But it's not one who by now shouldn't be working. Okay, but it appears that we are still creeping. Now, yesterday I was listening to Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, his maiden speech as the first prime minister of the country. And in summary, that speech was like, behold the new nation I present to you, full of hopes, full of everything you can think of as a nation. But 55 years down the line, we have issues of nepotism, we have issues of dashed hopes, because fine, we are a rich country, but full of very poor people. We have a country that at this point, even the presidency will tell you we're doing it on a low key. For obvious reasons, commonsensically, what are we celebrating? There are many, about 40% or more, unemployed, mainly the youths. So what are we talking about? For me, it's a country that has taken 55 years, let's say 55 steps forward and about 105 steps backward. So you can imagine what that means. It's like we're just 5 steps ahead.
Blessing, let's not keep you out of this. 55 years of nationhood. We should celebrate, no doubt. I mean, you celebrate every milestone you hit, but how do we move on from where we are right now? As a couple of the panelists have said, there isn't much to smile about. But how do we move forward? How do we, in our usual Nigerian sense, look for hope where there isn't any? How do we?
I must say that it's very difficult. It's like trying to get water in the desert. But the first thing we need to do is to go back to our constitution. The constitution that this country is operating with is faulty. Without amending that constitution to make it something that close up all the loopholes, we are not going anywhere. The problem, I still believe strongly, the problem lies with the constitution. Why? Because that constitution was already put together. Let's not forget, after Abacha died, they wanted to transition. I believe that.
And the people were not consulted.
Yes, it was put together by just some former military generals that were just they just wanted to already move over to the civilian. That is why you find out that it's so difficult to prosecute anybody for corruption. It's so difficult to decide on what is and what isn't. And it's so easy for some people to have an upper hand over the other. So it's time, 55 years, if you really want to practice democracy, you need to go back to that constitution. You need to change some things inside that constitution. It will help us.
All right, finally on this, Adora, you've been on a bit of a holiday. Okay, so we have 55 years of nationhood. Of the 55 years, we've done about 17 years straight of democratic rule. Is this some kind of glimmer of hope? Have we finally decided on the system of government that would better help us reach our goals as a country? We've tried everything. We've tried the parliamentary system, we've tried military, we've tried presidential in the past. Now we've settled for presidential democracy, styled after the American style of democracy. Have we finally settled for that? Is this going to help us realize all of the dreams that people like Tafawa Balewa, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and Obafemi Awolowo spoke about in those early days of independence?
Well, yeah, I think we have settled for democracy. I mean, given the fact that we've gone through 17 straight years without. Yeah, people have been talking about several things, unity and all of that, but we've stayed together through that, through all the infightings and outfightings between political parties. But I think it's beyond just having democracy, as a form of government. I think we need to truly practice democracy. We need to ensure that every arm of government functions like it should. We need to, democracy is the government of the people, by the people, for the people. I may not have gotten the sequence correctly, but the people need to be involved. You and I need to be involved. The man on the street needs to be involved. Again, another thing that will make it work for us is, just like Blessing said, we also need to implement true federalism in the country. It's not just about government at the center. Every arm of every level of government, should be allowed to function. The state government should be allowed to function properly. The local government, state government should let the local government function properly if we want things to work.
Of course, that's another issue for another day. I mean, the local government. The suppression of local government by the state government.
If we begin that discussion,
I'm just putting that as an aside. It's terrible. I think it's the biggest disservice to our democracy ever. But that's for another day. There's so much to talk about. 55 years, honestly, in a continent like Africa, it's something to celebrate. I do hold I shared my opinion about the whole idea of independence, because it's almost like we're celebrating the British all over again. Well, we should actually be condemning them for the plundering of our economy.
Let me come there. If you ask me, there's this secret fantasy I always have, that what if we have
what if they had stayed back?
No, yes, maybe. What do you mean?
Just in case.
No, I was thinking.
What if they had stayed back?
Maybe things would have. I always used to think that we want this democracy.
What you would have had? Is a system similar to what you had in Rhodesia or in Zimbabwe. And South Africa. South Africa is a good example. What happens in South Africa is economic. Now what you have is economic apartheid. You had political appetite up until 1994. But what is happening now is economic appetite. Yes, there are a number of black people who are doing well, moving up the ladder, but the bulk of the poor in South Africa are the blacks. So what happened after the end of appetite is that if political power was handed over to the black majority, while the whites held on to economic power.
Trust me. Why is it like that everywhere?
No, trust me.
Can I just come in?
Just 1 minute.
You gentlemen, you said something.
Yeah.
Miriam, for instance, pointed to Ghana. Sorry to take you back. There's no country that doesn't have these issues. I'm telling you.
No doubt.
You go to Ghana, you turn on the radio, BJO FM, CTFM, or whatever, you hear them complaining. Corruption is on the increase.
Even in America, people complain. So it's
talking about the Constitution. The issues with them in this country didn't start after Abacha died. Whatever this country is facing started from the independence, the post-independence era. Excuse me, please. All these guys who gave the great speeches that we're talking about, they were not blameless. That is where it started from. And I'm telling you, Blessing, if you like, bring the best constitution in the world to this country. Whether the constitution is good or bad, if the people are not determined, or the leadership are not determined to run the country right, it won't be run right. The British run an unwritten constitutional system, but they're able to run the country, and I agree.
And rightly so.
Let's do the right things for the betterment of the people. That's it. It's all about leadership and the people. But
So-
they say leadership comes from the people.
So just to summarize, and this is putting everything virtually all of us have said here into one statement and moving on to the next story. We've had 50 years of independence, 55 years of independence, but we've also had 55 years of failure of leadership. 55 years is glaring because the first coup came 3 years after independence or 6 years after independence. First coup.
67, about 6 years.
Yeah, about 6 years after independence, you would expect that. At that point, there will still be the euphoria of independence, etc., etc. But there was already dissatisfaction less than 10 years in.
Are the independence leaders?
And I remember recently I read Nzogu's speech after that coup, and I suggest that all Nigerians should read it. I was surprised. I said it's a good thing that Nzogu was killed. If he had stayed alive till 2015, I wonder what he would have written. What he wrote was.
What did he say?
No, he spoke about mass corruption, failure of the civil service, etc., etc., and he went on and how political leadership had failed. And I'm saying this is 6 years after independence. If this is 2015, I will talk about these things as if it's in glowing terms. A lot of what he mentioned in that speech.
It's still happening.
And now, back then, there was this
If we must agree on one thing, going forward, we need to see renewed leadership. We need to move away from this greedy, selfish direction which our leaders have taken for a very long time and start working for the people. And the people must stand up and ask to be served properly.
Yeah, how many festivals of cultural votes have we had since 1960? From the first parliament in 1960, the military guys weren't happy because these guys would go to parliament with servants who hold their long flowing gowns, and they're wondering where's the money going to.
No, it's not to get
It's
started.
but it's an opportunity to remind the man that wears a very from Dara that look, any church service or Muslim prayer that doesn't go according to the pattern, we should blame the imam.
Yeah.
So it simply means we are going to blame leaders of the country if anything goes wrong.
I remember it was Buhari himself that said that when the fish is bad, it starts from there. So let's go on. So the Hajj, this happens every year. If you are familiar with Islamic rites, so a group of pilgrims from around the world go to Saudi Arabia and they observe the Hajj. There are a number of activities, one of which is the stoning of the devil. It's symbolic. And to complete the Hajj, you have to carry out this act, which is the symbolic stoning of the devil. And it means that you are throwing away all of you're fighting temptation, you are stoning all of the evils, etc., in your life. And this year, a number of people died during that activity. A great number of them Nigeria. I don't think we have an exact number yet.
Yeah, we do.
It's about 64 for Nigeria, but over 200 still missing. So we don't know the status of those people, which is why I said I wouldn't have an exact number. So we don't know if they are missing in transit or they're actually dead and haven't been accounted for.
244
missing. All right. And Iran has gotten into this because Iran seems to have suffered the highest number of casualty, and they've got into some political back and forth with Saudi Arabia. It's sad that this happened. It's also sad that this happened just a little after the crane incident in Saudi Arabia, where a number of lives were lost, and I hear some Nigerians were also involved. Some Nigerians were involved in that. So this here breaks my heart. It breaks my heart whenever people die, and particularly when they die in human-related, or what could be called from mistakes from human action. Kofi, what's your take on this? The Saudi authorities, did they handle this right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, the first thing the prince, it was the monarchy who was in charge of Hajj operation, said was blamed it was the pilgrims' fault. And of course, the pilgrims were Africans because they have different structures, different routes for those who go to the site. And what we gather is that an important dignitary, I think the Minister of Defense, was visiting the king at that time, and they decided to close some of the exit points. And because of that, those pilgrims who were returning from the site clashed with those pilgrims who were going to the site, and it caused a delay. And of course, you expect that a stampede occurs. Now, what do you expect at sites where you want to have crowd control is you have a lot of exits. And if you go to new Adokia and Maximaca Stadium, you have so many exits so that if there is a stampede, you can move out through the usual exits and the emergency exits. This time, the exits were closed. I mean, so I'm happy that the Amir Hajj from Nigeria, who is the Emir of Kano, came out strongly to say something against it.
We'll get to that, but we do have to take headline news, and Ima Fabio is in the studio. So we'll continue with the Hajj and other discussions right after the news. So stay with us. You're listening to The Forum here on 92.3 Nigeria Info. Remember, you can send us your comments at Nigeria Info FMPH. That's at Nigeria Info PH, pardon me, on Twitter, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Nigeria Info PH. Stay with us, don't worry.
Headline News, Nigeria Info 92.3. Headline News.
The headlines in 92.3 Nigeria Info. Burkina Faso's interim government army retakes coup guard barracks in Ouagadougou. Burkina Faso coup leader General Gilbert Dendere asks troops to lay down arms. 3 convicted Al Jazeera journalists appeal to Egypt's president for pardons. South African faith-based organizations and civil society groups plan to march against corruption. Central African Republic capital Bangui in lockdown after days of intense fighting between Christians and Muslim groups. President Muhammadu Buhari says he will head the Ministry of Petroleum Resources in new cabinet. APC Bayelsa governorship primary to hold today. INEC formally closes its Defense of Rivers State governorship election petition tribunal. Rivers State plans low-key Independence Day anniversary celebration. Armed robbers kill 2 people in Waterlines area of Port Harcourt. Senate to investigate Hajj stampede. President Buhari mourns Gamaliel Nosode. U.S. singer Chris Brown plans to promote course against domestic violence in Australia if issued with the country's visa. And in sports, FIFA's Ethics Committee issued lifetime ban on former Vice President Jack Warner from football-related activities. And that's the headlines on 92.3 Nigeria Info. Coming up at 11 a.m. is Africa Now. I am Ima Akpabio.
Nigeria Info, we'll be right back.
Just for the first one.
Timmy has gone
We had a
again.
meeting last night. They agreed to produce the vice, the deputy governor. But they're going to pull it because everything no one line. So
You always
Deputy governor.
3 commissioners laws and then this president another stuff.
so he feels he would win.
You won't win now because
Sorry.
for Timmy,
Do you understand? Nobody will vote for Timmy like this. If I went ahead in the camp, then knew that was what he was going in for.
but he lost that.
If you go there is an armed robber to get away from him. Because this character, Jonathan,
Once I already did, should I just give things ready for that now?
He's the beautiful bride to this ceremony.
After all the back and forth
She's back down.
big politicians.
But Shomole did the right thing. At least he spoke up. He didn't keep quiet.
The biggest stage in
Because the way primaries are done in Nigeria, the results are already written before you get there. So whatever is announced is but then things are changing. I think just by natural evolution, things are changing. By natural evolution. There's a lot of change you see now is even happening by some kind of aggressive revolution. It's just changing by natural evolution. The old ways just aren't tenable anymore. They're not tenable anymore. So imagine if Nigerians apply a bit of aggression.
Yeah.
Just imagine
Like change, like listen much
Wait,
earlier.
we are complaining because we are complaining because we are not the one, we are not chopping at that point.
But there's an African
There's
an African adage what you're saying.
It's going out of Google Hangout. So yeah, so I don't know how to post it.
If you're talking, you must keep quiet. Why you're
That will be that. It's a big line.
Yes, I'm Google
And it's live.
I just said now.
Okay, then you need to give me complete.
Are we good?
Should I? I'll play the promo anyway.
The shorter one.
Yeah.
Very short.
Anybody who wants to be successful president changes countries. You start a living president.
Prison.
Yes, beautiful reasons. Some people would like to go there and just be those
Because you want to jail people.
All right, it's 92.3 Nigeria Info, and it's 25 minutes to the hour of 11. Welcome back to the forum. My name is Tommy Bolade, and the full team, and I can see all of the guys still in the house. Kofi Battels, Mariano Okon, Daniel Semiwolua, Blessing Olomo, and Adora Okoli, and Andrew producing, of course. We were talking about the stampede, which led to the death of 717 pilgrims in Saudi Arabia. Iran puts it at over 1,000, and they describe it as the most tragic in the history of Hajj operations. But of course, that's unreal. Iran and Saudi Arabia have this rivalry or this opposition, which has been going on and is tied to their different Islamic belief. Iran, I believe, is Shia, while Saudi Arabia is Sunni. So there's always this schism between those two groups. So Kofi, you were saying before we went on that break that it was poorly handled, it was poorly managed. You would expect, I mean, just to add to what you were saying, you would expect that an operation that was expecting about 3 million pilgrims from around the world would have been better organized in terms of moving people around, in terms of exit points, and entry and exit points should have been clearly marked, irrespective of whatever religious observances. It should have been clearly marked. Safety for lives should have been #1 priority.
And interestingly enough, from the accountables on the ground, the policemen and the emergency guys who were planted amongst the people to ensure that if there's any problem, they can respond effectively. Were not well trained. They cannot speak anything other than Arabic. The eyewitness accounts. So you're having people from Africa. You have to have people who can speak English and French, because the Egyptians are there, the Nigerians are there, and all the
Even American and Canadian.
Yeah. So you have to have people who can speak English and French. Unfortunately, these guys could not even communicate. So a lot of organizational deficiencies from the Saudi authorities. This has been happening year in, year out, and I'm surprised that they have not been. They spent billions of dollars to build the new bridges, and that will lead people to the stoning site. And I'm wondering whether those things are even safe. Those bridges, very high.
Daniel, I mean, one of the first comments to come out was to blame it on Africans. I think it just ties to some of the stories we hear out of Saudi Arabia, where dark-skinned people usually get the flack for most negative things that happen in that country. Were you surprised?
I wasn't surprised because it only restates the hearsay or the analogy about Saudis being racist. You know, when you get there, for those who have mingled, some of them are here who have mingled with the Saudis, they will tell you how bad it is, how they try to, you know, ostracize those who are blacks from the whites and all that. But on a lighter note, I looked at it that it's almost becoming a myth, and so it wasn't surprising that they blamed it on Africans, because many of the Africans will tell you, actually, those who went to stone the devil retaliated and stoned them back. That's on a lighter note. But it's unfortunate that they were quick to make that statement. For me, the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, to Mina, is a highly diplomatic affair and should be treated as such. And for them to come up with such a statement almost immediately, for me, it breached every tenet of diplomacy. It was just bad taste to diplomacy.
Yeah, it was very insensitive, actually. I mean, while it might be true, you don't say that immediately, because you have to give room to carry that investigation and ensure that whatever you are saying from the point of view of facts and not emotions. And in my opinion, for the statement to come out that early, where you had entire total population of about 3 million pilgrims, and I think it was out of emotions and not out of facts.
And I'm even wondering that I don't think it's an African country that topped the list of casualties, is it?
No, it's Iran.
So why then blame it on mostly Africans instead of to blame it on, like Kofi said, the failure to organize properly before such a huge annual diplomatic event rather than a religious ritual, if you are permitted to use that word.
And just to close on this, Adora, again, you see the hypocrisy of international media. If this were this incident happened on the continent of Africa, there would have been analysis of how there wasn't multiple entry and exit points, and how emergency rescue was late in responding, etc., etc. I mean, maybe this could be an agenda for the Buhari government, leading the line for Africa, and how Africa is reported and Africa is seen by the rest of the world. This would have been seen as incompetence if this had happened in Africa. But I'm not hearing those kind of comments coming from international media. Yes, it's tragic, and it's probably not time to shift blames, but you would expect that the same standards are applied when tragedy of whatever kind happens. But it seems there's a different script when it comes to Africa and the way Africa is seen and reported. The Saudi authorities were quick to report it on Africa. International media isn't attributing this to incompetence. They're not attributing this to the failure of the Saudi authorities to anticipate. But this is just an incident, and nobody's saying anything. I mean, there are no commentaries going on about it. Nobody is calling the ambassador of some African country to their office to lambast them for what has happened. It's happened. Is that what we have? Yeah, people just whip us.
Well, yeah. I mean, we have actually put ourselves in that position. We put ourselves there. I mean, I remember when the TB Joshua incident happened. South Africa, that's even an African country. I didn't take it lightly. Now, I think it's the way we position ourselves as Africans that will determine how they treat us. I remember when there was an incident, Kenya, and CNN called Kenya the hotbed of terror.
Sorry.
Kenyans went after CNN, and the CNN vice president had to go to Kenya
and
to apologize.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we can actually portray ourselves as people that should be respected, and of course, the international community will respect us. But perhaps they're treating Saudi Arabia differently because, number one, they're one of the largest producers of oil. They're allies of America. And again, this is sort of a religious incident. So people are trying to be very careful about it.
Yeah. All right. Just to follow up on what you said, I'm going to make another controversial statement. I think I like Uncle Rob. Robert Mugabe.
Yeah, I like it.
I like it. Yeah. I mean, for all of the failings he has as leader of Zimbabwe, he's not afraid to say his mind. He's not afraid to say his mind. The land distribution thing, which led to the debacle of the Zimbabwean economy, was predicated on the fact that we cannot be in Zimbabwe, and the bulk of the productive white lands are in the hands of white farmers, where black farmers don't have lands to farm. Yes, it led to the crash of the Zimbabwean economy, because many of these farmers had to go to places like Ilorin to start doing their business. But the truth of the matter is, common sense needs to prevail. Now, whether Mugabe's politics is right or not, I leave that to you. But there are certain things I will take from him, and I think more African leaders need to imbibe. More African leaders. I mean, the Kenyans were furious at CNN for calling Kenya a hotbed of terrorism, and they got an apology. I think more African leaders need to step up and defend themselves and do right, and not just expect that the world is going to treat them right, but do right. And when they are taken out of context, where they are presented in bad light, they need to defend themselves and demand for the right thing to be done. But let's move on. Blessing Olomu, we already know that Buhari is going to be Minister of Petroleum. He said that he's going to appoint a Minister of State for Petroleum. In effect, the Minister of State is going to be doing plenty of the dirty work. And I think that the president is going to be doing more supervisory or oversight function on the Ministry of Petroleum. I understand the logic in that. The petroleum industry seems to be again, to continue with the use of that word, the hotbed of corruption in Nigeria. So I guess the president wants to take responsibility for what happens or doesn't happen in that ministry. But do you think that this ministerial thing has been just too much drama?
Yes, I think it's too much drama. Everything in Nigeria is politicized. These ministries, they're not working. I mean, this president took over like
May 29th.
May 29th. You have June, July, August, September. And we are going to October tomorrow. That is about 5 months now. These things are moving. It's like in Rivers State. Something is happening in Rivers State. All the ministries that we have, because there are no commissioners, do they mean that those ministries are not working?
The ministries are working in terms of just keeping things going. If you are looking for a 4/10, if you're looking for a 5/10, yes, I think the ministries are working. In terms of, you have people who have daily schedule of duties, which they are doing. But in terms of policy direction, in terms of fixing a problem, in terms of taking Nigeria from a mediocre 4 or 5/10 to an 8 or 9/10, I don't think we're there. We're not doing that because there isn't any minister. Again, the minister does the intellectual work to the best of my understanding. The heavy lifting is done by the PAMSEC and his team. But the minister is the guy who comes with the...
I think that's because over the years, it's always been like that.
No,
so
but
more or less, the PAMSECs have seen themselves that most of all these other things should be done by the minister. But I really don't think it should be so. Because that is the problem. We have a lot of kind of like duplication of duties. For me, I see it almost like as if it's a duplication of duties.
So you think that the drama that has trailed
it's too much because, for example, he said, let's not forget what the president said that made him to do. He said he was trying to study these ministries to look at how. So why don't we give him a chance? If it works, fine. I mean, you've been doing something one way for years, and you have this man saying, "Let me try it this way." He even gave you a timeline as to when he appoint minister, and everybody, they are just shouting and shouting and shouting. Let him try it. If he fails, then we go for his head.
Marianne, this is the only president. I want to say in the history of Nigeria, but I'm just going to limit it to the last 17 years. The only president in the last 17 years that wanted to be president. Obasanjo was fresh out of jail. He was, made president essentially. He handed over to a Yar'Adua that was not willing. I mean, he wasn't willing in terms of political disposition, and his health wasn't in support. It fell to Jonathan because his boss, Yar'Adua, died. But this is the only president that wanted to be president. He's been trying to be president since 2003. And you would think that he has at least a tentative list of people that he might work with. Jonathan, if you've been trying since 2003 to be president, my assumption is that you are putting a list together of people of integrity, of people, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the criteria is, I don't know. I'm not in government. But you would think that such a list would be in his breast pocket somewhere or in his little black book where whenever he becomes president, he can now unleash that list. It's taking too long.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Tommy. And I always ask this question: is it that Mr. President was sleepwalking into presidency? Because it looked more like, oh my God, yeah, we need to get ministers. Oh, let's just start finding out if this man is good enough. I'm thinking if you're running for office for that long, you should have known. You should have been taking notes as you go, so that it won't be difficult. It won't be such a because it makes it look like, look, this is sacred. We have to call heaven and say, can you just put a lamp on the heads of the people who we need for ministerial appointments? It's taking long. Look, he made so many promises to Nigerians when he was campaigning, and so he raised the hopes of Nigerians, and we are very impatient people. I'm so sorry to say we're impatient people, and we want things to happen. We have had enough of talk. We want action, and I'm sorry that Nigerians are on the case of Mr. President, but sir, we need action, and we need it now. For certain things, we cannot wait. For certain other things, we can wait. So I don't think that we're pushing too hard. We just want things to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to see, action. I like to see things move as quickly as possible, because 4 years turns out to be a short time. Now,
Yeah.
I can only judge Mr. President and say, okay, it was worth the wait at the end of the day when the list is out and the ministers are appointed.
What are you expecting?
I'm expecting, to see people who are competent, round pegs and round holes, who I can shake, nod at and say, yes, this person will do a good job. Now,
would you be disappointed if you see some of what Nigerians will call mainstream politicians in that list?
If you're a mainstream politician, but you're a good politician, you're a competent person, I don't have a problem. Even if you're 90 years old, if you're competent enough, I don't have a problem. I mean, we don't want to say likes of Omobola Johnson, who did a good job, Minister of Communication. She knew a lot about that industry. Now, what I like to say about Marianne says is in politics, you can't counteract, even in life, before they hatched. I mean, if Buhari had a list, I'm sure that list went out the window once he formed an alliance with the APC. And you cannot counteract and say, okay, that's so go share when you don't even want the election. Because along the way, people are going to help you. And in politics, you have to pay back. It happens in every country.
The government's supposed to be some sort of settlement.
No, that's the hard truth.
Let's call it.
That's the hard truth.
Marianne, I agree with Kofi. John Kerry we can't take away the fact that he's Secretary of State today because he was the person that gave Obama his very big first platform. Remember in 2004, he gave that flowing speech and the world took note of Obama, got his Senate seat after that, became president no long after that. So, I mean, that's the way I see it. I'm not an American and I might be wrong about it, but I think that connection was made as far back as
So, but what's the place of competence and expertise? There is
competence as well. But listen, you see, the way we approach it is that we think that politics is like the Red Cross, where people need to do it from their hearts. No, people are not giving up their time, their intellect, and their resources to do it from their heart, essentially. And when they do it from their heart, they are doing it because they want to represent or they want to translate some of the ideas they have into governance. So essentially, people are doing it for themselves and by extension for their nation. I think what we should hope that the president is doing is that all of the people that he's going to appoint are people who are ready to work for the country. Whether they are technocrats, whether they are mainstream politicians, they are people who are ready to bend their backs and work for their country and not see this as an opportunity to stuff their pockets. And I think that's where we should make the clear distinction. If this is going to be a system where people think that because they have a ministry or they have the ministries are called juicy ministries. So if that's the scenario, that's the situation, then there's nothing has changed.
No, you see, nothing much has really changed because, like you said from the beginning, this is the only man that in the last say 4 out of 17 years, so give or take 13 or 14 years, he's been wanting to be president. It took only the mainstream politicians to bring him into power. All this while he's been wanting, but he's been failing because those who are mainstream politicians were not in his party until this marriage of APC, CPC, and AMPP, partially Abga, AMPP, and then partially Abga, now brought him to power. So I'm not going to be surprised. What you saw Buhari doing when he said, I want to be Minister of Petroleum is, for that ministry, back off, because I know there are too many urchins wanting to conspire to become ministers. And I understand because I came through, I wouldn't say, I don't want to use the back door, but I came through a conspiracy theory of too many mainstream politicians. There is no how I'm going to rule out politics in making my ministerial appointment. But for the Minister of Petroleum, back off, I'm in charge. For the others, we can share the spoils.
All
Well,
right.
how has that actually worked out over the years? I mean, we had Obasanjo headed the Ministry of Petroleum.
Didn't
So
get
why-
it.
Let me come in there.
Mhm.
You see, when Obasanjo headed that Ministry of Petroleum, it actually improved the law.
Yeah.
You know that Obasanjo inherited that ministry from the Abacha administration.
Mhm.
And you should not forget that this petroleum ministry started to decline under under successive military government. You cannot change these things overnight. It takes time. And Buhari has also been part of the
Ministry of
Petroleum.
before. He has been dead.
So you understand? I mean, I think the average Nigerian understands that the start and end of our corruption is in the oil industry.
Exactly.
So I mean, if we need to, especially now that our revenues have dwindled, if we need to really curb it, well, there must be closer observance of that
Exactly.
Now, we have a couple of messages. I'm going to take a couple on Twitter. Adora is going to read us a few on WhatsApp. So here we go. This is Timotheus or Sas. I like your name. 55 years. There are many things to be thankful of rather than being complaining of. US at 55 was worse than this. Thank you very much. At TimmyWise7777. Yeah,
Okay. Well, on WhatsApp, Comrade Solomon says we should at least celebrate the life God has given to us and also celebrate the good legacies made by former administrations in Nigeria, not that of GEJ and above, all the good governance of PMB. God bless Nigeria. And he says, my regards to Daniel Semerworima, a colleague then. Okay, Daniel, you have a fan. Brian from HA says, what are we celebrating? Is it the lack of power supply? Is it low infrastructural development? Is it lack of employment opportunities? Is it a poor economy? Is it poor education? Is it corruption, etc.? There's nothing to celebrate. Accept the mercy of God, our unity and democracy. That's all. Nothing again. May God bless Nigeria. Okay, and finally, someone says, good morning, ladies and gentlemen in the studio. 55 years, and yet we cannot boast of anything working for us. The educational sector is zero, road network is zero, electricity still epileptic, etc. I will rate Nigeria 2/10 on a scale of 1 to 10. All our past leaders need to apologize to Nigerians for keeping us the way we are. If Nigeria must remain, all the past leaders that are still alive must come together to correct the mistakes that they have made. And that is Amos from 11. That is failed.
We have a tweet here from Ora Lawrence. It's really a big loss for our country. I pray God consoles the families. PMB, I think he's referring to PMB being the president, being the Minister of Petroleum. PMB, if that's his best, I wish him well. Bora Lawrence, thank you very much. The first part of this comment was, I think, in reference to the
Hajj victims
in Saudi Arabia. So quickly, let's touch on. I mean, there's this final issue here that we need to touch on. But before we do, I was going to ask you. Do you really think, because I think the reason why there's so much tension and drama about the ministerial list is because over time it's seen as settlement compensation. Do you think that we're going to get that feel when this list comes out?
Yeah, well, that's a very difficult one to answer, because I mean the president has said, well, irrespective of what party you are, I'm not going to. But again, I mean, we saw some speculative lists going around yesterday, and I mean some of the names that we saw there purely will be compensatory. So of course you can't take that away from politics. There will be compensation in that list, whether we can see it or not. Some people would have nominated some people to be on that list, so definitely to be there.
I think it's fair in politics. If you give your time, if you give your resources, you should get compensated at the end of the day. Nigeria has been declared polio free, or we've been taken off the list of endemic countries. We were there for a very long time. I must say this, and I would usually not say this, but I must say this, that Rotary Club and the Rotary of everywhere in Nigeria, they've done
all over the world.
Rotary International in general.
But particularly in Nigeria, they've done a fantastic job, fantastic emphasis on fantastic, on tackling polio. They stayed on the polio subject. They were committed to it year in, year out, and I think they should pop whatever. I mean, pop something. Pop whatever it is.
But I think we're still on the way to be declared free.
Yeah, but the fact that we've achieved this landmark is something that we should celebrate, and they in particular. I mean, there are lessons here for all of us as Nigerians, as global citizens, and as organizations like Rotary and the rest. We need to pick a cause and stay committed to that cause.
Yeah.
And until we see a final conclusion to that.
I don't want Rotary to pop champagne or anything yet. Let's take a case study of Ebola in Sierra Leone. They were, I think it's Sierra Leone or Liberia, they were declared Sierra Leone, right? The World Health Organization declared them Ebola free. And then about 2 weeks or more, there was another incident that occurred. So we should take it easy. We are there at the crescendo, but you know what? It's very few persons that stay top at the crescendo. So at this point, we need to work so hard. Thumbs up, they have I encouraged to do so much more. Like you would say, when you were made one of the 50 most influential, that I mean, the reward for excellence is so much hard work. So it's time to work so harder than before.
Credit to the Nigerian country, we've not had a reported case of wild polio in 2 years, I understand. And you must give credit also to state and federal government. I see so many governors. I've seen the president himself carry his grandchild and had her vaccinated. So I mean, I see that as a symbolic gesture for places, particularly in the north, where there is the conception that those vaccines are designed for population control. It's a symbolic gesture that has to be encouraged because it goes a long way to availing people of their fears that this is to control population, etc. Because those are some of the conceptions that make polio, that have made it difficult to eradicate in Nigeria. So we must give credit to state and federal governments who are doing that. And to Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as well for their work over time, putting the money, putting their time to create awareness. And not just polio, they're doing malaria as well. And you know, you spoke about Ebola. It was the system they had put in place for that. Bill and Melinda had put in place for polio eradication that helped during the Ebola crisis. Well. So I think one thing
we must not forget the Nigerian government.
No, we must no the
Nigerian government tried. I mean.
All right. So thank you very much. Can't a minister be sacked if you mess up as a compensated appointee? That's a message that was coming in. I think I missed that. But we have to go. Yeah. Okay. I need to check that before we go. Sorry about that. Can't a minister be sacked if you mess up as a compensated appointee? Shouldn't termination be next? How difficult is it? Yes, a minister can be sacked. Yes, and they don't have tenure, so they can be changed in 1 year, 2 years if they don't perform well. And I hope the president does that. We hope to see that list today. We're holding our breaths, waiting that the list comes out. Thank you very much, guys. Blessing, Adora, and of course, Enei Andrew for producing. Thank you for being a part of the show. Send us your comments, views at nigeriainfo.fm. My name is Tony Bolade. Have yourself a wonderful day. Catch you again next Wednesday.
It's 11 o'clock.
What if we leave the door?
News is about to go on. Madam, read the news. I'll talk about it.
Africa Now on 92.3 Nigeria Info. 3 journalists convicted of aiding a terrorist organization while covering Egyptian unrest for Al Jazeera publicly appealed to Egypt's president to pardon them. Australian Peter Grassley said they also were seeking support for world leaders attending the UN General Assembly. The 49-year-old Grassley, arrested in Cairo in 2013, was freed in February after more than a year in Egyptian detention, but was later sentenced to 3 years in prison. Mali's government says at least 50 of its citizens were killed in the stampede during last week's Muslim Hajj pilgrimage near Mecca, Islam's holiest site. This is the second highest number of deaths reported by an African state, after the 54 by Nigeria. Pilgrims from at least 16 African states were caught up in the stampede. Saudi officials have denied reports that more than 1,000 people died in the stampede, saying that 769 were killed. Heavy firing erupted yesterday at the barracks of an elite military